can I achieve the same thing with half the effort or a quarter of the effort? Because same, I used to really plan for it. I would like make sure my hair was done and my makeup, and I'm going to be on camera. And sometimes, of course, I still do that, but sometimes I'm on like day 3 curls and it's going in a bun because that's just the kind of day I'm having. I was really surprised. Maybe you got this feedback too, because people responded so much more to when I made a mistake, when I did something off the cuff that I hadn't been planning to do. There was a lot of really good feedback that motivated me to like just let it fly.
Welcome to the Feminist Wellbeing Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Dozier, non-diet coach, certified intuitive eating counselor, and cognitive behavior coach. And I've earned a PhD in diet culture. And at the age of 40, after graduating from a 25-year dieting career, I said no more. And I'm here to guide you on how to feel damn good by reshaping your mind instead of the size of your pants. In this podcast, we go beyond the food and fight diet culture and patriarchy by living powerfully. And being powerful means speaking up. Like I'm like specifically talking louder right now because that's what this episode is about. It's about expressing ourselves through our voice and our thoughts. The things we think that we need to express into the world. And I have a friend of mine, Michelle Leotta, as a guest today on the podcast. We've been biz besties for a couple years now. We work on a similar field, and we both are playing big in our business and in our life. And we both have a podcast, and we both have found our power through using our voice, through going through the journey of learning to love our voice through the means of a podcast. And I wanted to bring her onto the show to share her story of finding her voice as an entrepreneur, a business owner, a single mother, the single family earner in raising her 2 kids, and same thing for me, not leaning on to anyone, and how our voice has been this vehicle by which we found our power. And I think for many of you listening to this, you're thinking, well, that's not me. But it is. It is you. In today's world and technology, Michelle has a tool to help you start putting your voice into the world. That's going to help you with that. But I just want to say this before we roll in the interview, that in today's world, podcasting is not an elite only world. You can literally put out your podcast with your smartphone and a pair of earbuds. That's all you need. That's all you need to start putting your thoughts in the world and starting to develop your voice and your power. So, my team's going to roll in the interview. Enjoy and tag me in your video and your podcast of you putting your powerful self into the world. Welcome to the show, Michelle.
Well, thank you for having me, Stephanie.
I'm always excited to have you on the podcast. You were here a year and a half ago, and we were talking about asking for money. So that's podcast 90 in Undiet Your Podcast. But a few weeks ago, me and you were talking, just like networking, business, women in business, entrepreneur type of conversation. And we were sharing about not liking our own voice, that both of us were in that place before, and that we meet many women who don't share their thought, express themselves because they don't like their own voice. And I thought that you can come on the podcast and share your story because you have a beautiful story about how you had to learn to love your own voice, and now today you teach other women to do that. So let's talk about your story.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting conversation to have with you in the first place because I think we were talking more about body image and loving your body
Yes.
and and it's just like anything else. Women look in the mirror and we go, I don't like my eyelashes, I don't like my arms, I don't like this, I don't like that. And then we hear our voice. I remember, the old answering machines or the first time you might have really
Yes,
heard
the
your voice.
cassette.
Yes. And going, oh, is that what I sound like? And it's the same thing, like that we're just like abhorrent of our own being. And it's incredible because when you start a business and you have to put yourself out there and you have to, especially these days, be doing all kinds of videos and things, you're going to hear your voice over and over. It was really difficult for me in the beginning.
And it's crazy that, like, for anybody listening to this, we're not born wired to not like our body or our voice. This is something we developed. This is something we become because of our social conditioning. We're conditioned to not like ourselves, including our voice.
Yes. Oh, it's big. It's heavy when you really think on it. And yes, because when you first started saying that, I thought, think of the cartoons that we even watched as kids and the voice that the characters are given and what the pretty girl's voice versus like the not so pretty girl's voice. And maybe, you hear your voice and you don't identify it as being like the voice that you wish you had. But it's more than that, right? It's just general misogynistic. It's the same old stuff.
Well, it is. And as you were talking, I was teaching a class yesterday called Play Bigger. Like it's for women entrepreneur, like taking space. And I was explaining to the women how the time, because we're conditioned to not like ourselves and not want to speak loud and not take space, instead of using all of our mental space, our brain space to strategize how we can grow our business and take more space, we are instead consumed with how can we make ourselves smaller? How can we avoid being on video and listening to our voice? And by doing that, we take less space and we don't claim our power.
I don't know the statistics. We'll have to look it up, but I'm positive there are more male podcasters than
Oh,
female podcasters by a long shot.
mm-hmm.
This is no surprise.
Yes.
Definitely no surprise. And, I used to work in advertising. So I started my career as an art director and working in big advertising. If anyone's ever watched Mad Men, it hasn't changed that much. It really hasn't, even though Mad Men took place so many decades ago. It's very much the same. It is the old boys network and the men yucking it up with each other. And in a meeting, for a 5'3", 20 something woman, you were not taken seriously even the slightest bit. And I found that I was constantly being overshadowed by the men who were telling jokes and the men who were even telling jokes at women's expense. I could not get a word in. It was a very toxic environment to try to grow a career as a woman, and not being put on the good accounts. The women always just get put on the accounts for like women's clothing or the makeup brand, but you don't get to work on the big clients. It was very difficult for me to find my voice. So when I transitioned from advertising and I became a health coach in 2009, suddenly I was the face of my business. I was the voice of my brand. And it was like, whoa, scary to step into the spotlight like that.
Let's go back to your corporate days because I had the same thing. Like I was in the corporate world for 15 years, and this is going to relate to a lot of the women listening to this podcast that have career. When I was speaking and when I was trying to take space through my voice, either like at the meeting table or on a conference call, I found myself playing a character, not truly being me. Like it wasn't my authentic voice. And a lot of labor went in managing how I was showing up, how I was speaking to almost, I want to say, play the game. Was that the same thing for you?
Oh, definitely. And I don't know if maybe men also, to a degree, feel they have to do that and play a certain role and be whatever, they think they have to do to own the room. That was a
Yeah.
big deal in advertising, especially owning the room, selling it to the client. But I was never going to find my authentic voice swimming in that sea. Right? I was constantly being squashed, being smaller, not getting the raises, not getting the promotions, doing the work, and still not getting the recognition. And yet, they would talk about how my breast bounced when I walked down the hall.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. I needed out of that so badly. So I didn't leave because it was such a toxic environment. I left because I fell in love with health and wellness, and I had this other passion I wanted to pursue. But I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad. I think there comes a point in many women's life also that we have to decide, like, are we going to raise a family? What do we want that to look like, etc. And so there were probably like 10 different reasons that it was a really good move for me to go off on my own. But how scary to wake up the next morning and go, "Ooh, I have a business. I'm a business owner."
Well, especially for you as an a marketing account executive, where you manage the face of other brands. I'm assuming that's what you were doing. And now you become the brand in the face, like you're completely on the other side.
Yes, front and center. I mean, at least I had a lot of great experience in knowing about marketing and strategy and that type of stuff, but stepping into it and putting myself forward. Wow. I mean, yes, your voice, but also, your face is on everything. Everyone has to comment about how I'm letting my hair go gray, or if I've gained weight or lost weight, or you
Yeah.
just, yeah, there's a lot.
So how did you came to podcasting? And almost I want to say, because you've been around since 2009, you said?
Yep.
That's like I'm calculating in my head, that's 15
15
years.
years.
And if I dial back the clock 15 years ago, it wasn't so much video back then. It was mostly image and text, and then it became podcasts. And is that where that notion of voice and having to love your voice came in for you?
I think the first terrifying thing that I had to do was holding teleseminars.
Ooh, you're dialing back the clock.
I
Yes.
know.
Tell
I've
the
earned
people who have no idea what the tele seminar is, what it was.
every gray hair. I've earned it. Yeah, we had teleseminars because there was no Zoom. There was no easy way to do a webinar. I think GoToWebinar existed, but it was extremely expensive and just slides. So what we did were these teleseminars where people would call in and, press 9 to mute yourself, press 6 to raise your hand, that kind of thing. It was very rudimentary, but they were recorded, and I would provide the recording afterwards, just like we would now with any kind of webinar recording. And this is where I had to start hearing my voice for the first time, speaking in a role of expert authority, selling my services, coaching people. And I was just mortified. I was like, is that really what I sound like? But it was shocking because anybody else said, oh, it sounds great. No one else said, oh boy, your voice really sounds this way or that way, or had any explicit judgments, but I had a lot of judgment on myself. So it started there. Video started to come in. Here we go. Here's a throwback. Do you remember Periscope?
Yes, I had a show on Periscope,
You
people.
did.
From my clinic in Toronto, when I had a clinic, I had it was through the iPad because iPhone didn't exist. It was an iPad. Yeah, oh yeah, holy. Yeah, talk about Periscope.
Well, yes, for anyone who doesn't remember it, it was like the first live streaming video platform. And we would just get on it and just kind of talk and not really know what we were saying or why or who would be watching or why. But it was terrifying, of course, to be in live streaming video. And then that technology segued into like Facebook Live. And we
Yep.
were able to go live on Facebook. So what has happened in my career is I went from health coaching and having my own health coaching practice to mentoring health coaches with my advertising background that always came very easy to me, the
Yep.
whole marketing side of business. So I had created a quite large Facebook group. And when I was able to live stream video into that Facebook group, I was like, oh, this is great because every day I'd like be answering questions and typing. And I thought, what if I just once a week got in there and verbally answered everybody's questions? I could be so much more thorough and drive engagement in the group,
Yeah.
because it did back then, not so much anymore. So that's what I started doing. I committed to once a week showing up live in my group. I've been doing that now for like probably 7 years. I still show up every single week live in the group. And after the first 6 months, 12 months of doing so, I was like, oh, I'm recording content every single week. We could be repurposing it to this podcasting thing I've been hearing
Because
about.
that was a new thing.
Yeah, like I didn't want to be a podcaster by any means. It didn't start that way, but it was like I already had this audio. Why not
Yeah.
publish it to this other platform? Because I heard, I might be able to, reach my intended audience that way and, be able to serve more people. So that's what we did. And it was, if you go back, I mean, please don't, but if any, just take my word for it. If you go back and you listen to the early episodes, I didn't know what I was doing. Again, no strategy, no, like, this is what you're supposed to say, this is what you're supposed to do. It's very rough. And actually, to this day, we don't edit the show.
Same here.
So, right, if like, something falls in my office, you hear it go bang. If I forget what the heck I'm talking about, there's a couple seconds that I go,
But I don't know about you, but for me, like, so you went to the route of Facebook Live. I went right into podcasting. So it's going to be 8 years in October 2024. But I remember like the first, I don't know, 50 episodes are not even on iTunes because it's like, it was no good. Like, and I remember A, not liking my voice, but B, being so concerned with having everything perfect that I used to write literally a script and I was reading the script because I didn't want to forget a word. I didn't want to mispronounce anything. Like, I wanted it to be, there's so much energy that went into showing up perfectly.
And I'm sure your listeners grew and gave you better feedback when you started letting your voice flow more authentically.
Yeah. Because when I learned to love my voice, it was like a correlation. The more I started to like love myself, love my voice, the less labor went into trying to show up perfectly.
That's a beautiful thing in life and in business, where you're like, can I achieve the same thing with half the effort or a quarter of the effort? Because same, I used to really plan for it. I would like make sure my hair was done.
Yeah.
And my makeup, and I'm going to be on camera. And sometimes, of course, I still do that, but sometimes I'm on like day 3 curls and it's going in a bun because that's just the kind of day I'm having. I was really surprised. Maybe you got this feedback too, because people responded so much more to when I made a mistake,
Yes.
when I did something off the cuff that I hadn't been planning to do. There was a lot of really good feedback that motivated me to like just let it fly.
Yeah. I think when and this is for anybody who wants to find their voice to express their message, whatever message it is irrelevant. But the more authentic you can be, the more like your wisdom from your inner world, your wisdom, your intuition, whatever you want to call it, like these are the most powerful words you can say. The one you're trying to edit and look perfect will not have the same impact on people than the one that comes from your gut.
And you start to sound like everybody else.
Yes.
When we do the editing of ourselves, or even following fashion trends or whatever, we just become carbon copies of each other. But when you just say the thing the way you would say it to like your best friend, that's what stands out. That's what's like hasn't been edited within an inch of its life and photoshopped and perfected before it's released into the world. And I think it's incredibly freeing. It has been for me I would like to say I went into podcasting with that skill. I did not, but I developed it, and it's been incredibly freeing, because then I think even more in my everyday life, I'm able to just speak freely, say the things the way I want to say them, and and know like I have a whole listenership. I have so many downloads. I have years and years and years of episodes that people binge listen. Like, gosh, maybe what I have to say isn't so bad.
Yeah. So I want to talk about in about 5 minutes about saying things that nobody says because that takes courage. But I want to talk about how, or ask you, how did you became more comfortable with your voice? Like, is there anything particularly you did to get yourself to love your voice more?
I did not do it on purpose. And this is probably the wrong answer, but I think because of all like the outside validation from the right people, right? If I was trying to produce a podcast for my colleagues back in advertising, I don't think it would go over well. I don't think they would care what I had to say, no matter what the actual content was. But because I found a niche where I stood out, people cared, there's a world of people out there that are not like where you are today. There's
Yeah.
so many pockets of and groups of people and communities. I had to find one that where I was valued, and then I was better able to value myself, better able to hear myself and nod my head and go, yeah, it's pretty good.
So what I hear you say is that the more you focus on the impact you had on other human being, the more courage you had to put your voice out there.
You just made that sound so good.
I know.
Thank you.
But you know that like it's very similar to how I teach about body image. It's not about loving your body. It's about respecting your body in such a way that it's going to support you physically, emotionally throughout your whole life. So how can you have a relationship with that thing that will enable you to do what the fuck you want for the rest of your life? And in business, it's the same thing for me. Like when I lean into how I'm helping other people, it fuels me with courage.
That is 100% accurate. It was so demoralizing to feel like I was having no impact and my words were not landing anywhere. And that can make you feel small, or I guess, you could find the people where you can impact, you
So,
can
so
change
let's talk
lives.
about the actual word we say. Because when we try to be perfect, we try to say the same thing as everyone else. Right? And people have heard the same thing over and over and over again. How did you find the courage to say the thing that nobody else wanted to say?
I realized I had an audience and they loved it. I'm not going to say I ever had a glass of wine before releasing a podcast episode, but I will say I've written emails after having a glass of wine every now
Yeah.
and then. And sometimes it helps you just loosen the tongue a little bit and say it. I'm saying one glass, by the way. I'm not saying five glasses. But I got that same kind of freedom from just looking at the numbers. Wow, look at how many people cared about this. Look how many comments they left. Look how many lives were impacted for the better. I think I started to experiment. What if I do say that thing that disagrees with the common accepted norms? How will that go over? What if I show up without makeup and say,
Yeah.
hey, I just came from the gym, so this is how you get me today? And I always see the response is better, is greater when I'm less scripted. Even though now I'm in my mid 40s, sometimes you just can't find the word.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, I'm at peace with silence now these days. Like I have like a 2 second silence. Let me find my word. Okay.
Yes, more and more. You have to kind of accept that too, that it won't always flow just perfectly.
I was saying that to someone else, but I watched a TED talk recently, and it was a researcher in the field of public speaking. And he said that based on his research, the people who were actually capable of like not say anything to find the right words instead of using mm, actually are more confident in themselves than the people who use filler word. I'm like, well, that's what I do. That's confidence.
I like that. I'm going to have to
Yeah.
try that. Goodness. As we've been talking, I want to share with you that it's the same time period in my life. Once my podcast took off, was when my marriage dissolved, not because of the podcast,
No, but I'm
but
sure there's a correlation.
I think so. You start to feel empowered in an area of your life. You start to have your voice heard in an area of your life. And you look around and you go, am I still surrounded by any of those jerks from advertising? And it turns out I was.
Ooh, he was that it was in your house. It was in your house.
Exactly. Quite literally, because we used to work together. So, and I remember there were a couple key moments where I took the confidence that I had now built and brought it into my personal life and positively impacted my family life. I remember I said one day, "You may not make fun of how I drive while I'm driving, and if you do, I'm going to pull over, and you can drive." And I did. I remember pulling over the car because he had yet one more thing to say about I should have gone faster, I should have merged this way or whatever. Me, who has a perfect driving record, thank you. And I just pulled the car over and I said, "You may not talk to me that way," with my two boys in the back. And that was it was the beginning. I was going to say it was the beginning of the end, but it was the beginning of the beginning.
Well, it was the beginning of you becoming your more authentic self, and that didn't fit in that relationship.
100%. You start to value yourself, love yourself, accept yourself. If someone else doesn't,
Mm.
no thanks.
And I think for people listening to this, speaking up will help you find your people, be it in business and career or in your friend. When you truly speak up your truth in an authentic way, you will find your people.
It's just a nice feedback loop. The
Yeah.
more you're yourself, the more the right people come, the more the right people are there, the more confidence you have to be yourself. I feel very, very blessed to be in an industry that I could do that. And I think women in all, whatever businesses we're starting or endeavors we're starting, and we have that opportunity.
And we're both in the self-development slash health and wellness industry. And that's another thing where the conversation was when we decided to do this podcast, was because our podcasts are both top ranking in typically an industry dominated by men, right? Self-development with all the gurus are typically men. And the same thing with health. It's dominated by men, but because we both put out our voice within our niche, women connect with that. And
And
when,
by the way, just for everyone listening, we both of your show and my Health Coach Power Community podcast are in the top 1% of all podcasts. That includes tech. That includes every vertical.
the master of statistic.
Like that blew my mind because yes, certainly in the personal development space, dominated by a lot of male voices, but like all podcasts, are you kidding me? So
Yeah.
congratulations, lady. It's really,
Same
really
thing with you. And we're
amazing.
both doing it. And I just, for those of you watching on camera, like we're both doing it looking natural, being natural, completely unscripted. We literally met 2 minutes before I press record. And we're going to talk about this. And I have 3 bullets on a piece of paper,
Same.
right? We both are trusting ourselves to figure out a way of talking about this that will help people listening. Here's my question. I know, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the podcast, is because you have a thing that can help people start, particularly a podcast. Because in today's world, starting a podcast is really accessible.
It is. And when I started, I didn't have a fancy microphone or anything. I just used the earbuds that came with my, my Apple iPhone. And you can start just with what you already have in front of you. So, yes, I have a quick start guide. It's intended for health coaches, those in the wellness industry, et cetera. Anyone who's like, yes, I want to reach people. I want people to search for whatever they're struggling with and find me and my business. And it's a beautiful search engine to be a part of.
Yep.
Compared to blogs, compared to YouTube channels, podcasting is still, you can still get in there. It's not so saturated. And I saw something interesting the other day. They said, are there a lot of podcasters? Yes, but very few stick with it. So if you stick with it, past your third, fourth, fifth episode, you keep going. Now I think I have over 300. It actually is not that crowded. It's not that crowded of a space. So, shall I tell everyone about?
Yeah. Go ahead. It's a free thing for everybody who wants to start their podcast, put their words out in the world.
Yes, you can go to healthcoachpower.com/Stephanie, because for your audience, we have this quick start guide, and you can have a podcast up and running in like 5 minutes. It's not hard to get the setup going. The important thing, you heard me say it, right? The first episodes were terrible. You heard Stephanie say it. The first episodes are terrible. So just get those out of the way, just start. And it's okay if they're terrible. Nobody's going to listen to the first episodes anyway, unless you tell them about it. And over time, you will also have this opportunity to develop your voice. So again, it's totally free. It's at healthcoachpower.com/Stephanie.
Yeah. And we have it in the show note as well. And I'm just going to add my grain of salt. Like, starting a podcast is not my thing that I do for teach people. So I highly recommend you go get the guide. And I truly want to invite anyone who wants to speak up. Like, podcast to me is better than blogging. I don't know your opinion. Like, I'm going there not knowing your opinion. But in today's world where people do not have a lot of attention, having something voice-based that they can listen in their car while they're walking, 100 times your chance of people actually listen to what you have to say versus writing a blog. What do you think?
I think, there's always pros and cons, but I find that when someone has been hearing your voice,
that's another way, yeah,
over and over and over, for some reason they feel like they really know you, where you don't quite get that reading blog posts, even if you really read the entire blog post. And people don't, they skim. But I have so many. I was just at an event in New York City a couple of weeks ago, and coaches were coming up to me going like, I listened to like 3 of your podcasts this morning, or I love that episode you did about such and such. And they'll quote things back to me that I said. And I'm like, did I say that? Amazing.
And I think there's a deeper connection.
Yes.
Than just a string of letter put on a page. The fact that we connect with the voice.
And it's across, I've seen the same thing, in various types of podcasts, because although right now I have my Health Coach Power community podcast that's doing so well, when I was still working one-on-one with coaching clients of my own, I had a podcast there, and the same thing would happen. And even before that, I actually did a live radio show with a couple other coaches. Yes, that'll break you right in when you're live. Woo, sweating bullets. And same thing. It was like you immediately gain a very tight-knit following. There's your voice. It's so powerful.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having been here, and invite everybody to grab it. It's going to be in the show notes. And I encourage all of you to speak your truth. And take that as a journey to get to know yourself better and get your words out into the world. Hey, my sisters, if you are loving what you are learning on the podcast, you have to come and check out our feminist mentorship masterclasses and our internationally recognized non-diet coaching certification on our website at www.stephaniedozier.com/shop. This is where you can get the individual coaching and the support to take the concept taught on the podcast to the next level. Embrace our well-being in a way that will expand our collective freedom and power. Come and join myself and other women to learn how to reshape your mind, not your body. I'll see you there.